After getting rid of victimless crimes, will there be stricter punishment for actual violent crimes? I think, first of all, there's going to be a lot less violent crime. If you look at the sources of how crime happens, and when I'm saying crime, I'm talking about actual violent crime, crimes of theft. When someone has been criminalized for engaging in something that had no victim, they now go to prison. And when they go to prison, a lot of them weren't ready for prison. And because of the nature of how prison is, without getting too graphic, they go through a lot of really terrible stuff in there. And they have to become much harder and in many cases, much more violent and much more, jaded and brutal just to survive in there. And now they get out of prison. They've got all that trauma of that happening. It's changed them as a person. The world that they go into looks, depending on how long they've been in there, looks entirely different from the world they left. Many of them, they are the victims of identity theft, because while they were in prison, their social security number was out there floating around and they had no way to defend themselves against identity theft. So their credit's been ruined. They have a felony record, so they can't really get a good job. Most cases, they're on parole, so they can't leave the state. They don't really have a lot of options. They can either live on assistance in abject poverty, or they can end up getting involved in crime. There are some opportunities where they may be able to work legally, but not a lot. And it is very hard, depending on what they have on their record, for them to be able to get a job. And in some states, there are entire types of jobs they're not allowed to even seek. It's almost impossible for them to even get like a business license in many cases. So they're choosing between abject poverty or a life of crime. And sometimes that life of crime may be a life of violent crime. It may be theft. It's putting more people in a bad situation. And then, more than likely, they end up right back in prison. And so it's a terrible system. So in terms of what the punishment would be for individual crimes, I would say Joe and I believe that should be handled at the state level. States and communities should be deciding what their policing looks like, what their ways of interacting with the community look like, what punishments should be. We're not a fan of mandatory minimum sentencing. Mandatory minimum sentencing forces people into prison even when the judges don't want to give them those sentences, and instead see opportunities for them to go into diversion programs and get help and address the root cause of why it even happened in the first place. Mandatory minimum sentencing makes it so that judges have to pound that gavel and put people in prison for long periods of time that they never wanted to and that they didn't think was even necessary.